The first thing I noticed was that she still touched the hollow of her throat when she was trying not to cry. 17 years had passed since senior year, since cafeteria noise and Friday night bleachers and me pretending not to stare at the girl who sat 2 rows ahead of me in English. I had a badge now, a county radio on my shoulder, and a nameplate on my desk that said Sheriff Caleb Turner. But when Tessa Grant walked into my office at 8:17 on a rain-dark Tuesday morning, I forgot every official sentence I knew. She stood just inside the doorway of the Maple Ridge Sheriff's Office with water dripping from the ends of her auburn hair. One hand wrapped around the strap of a worn leather purse, the other pressed lightly to her throat. "Caleb?" she said, like she wasn't sure the man behind the desk was real. I was 34 years old. I had pulled men out of wrecked trucks, broken up bar fights, delivered death notices, and once talked a half-drunk groom out of climbing a water tower in his tuxedo. None of that prepared me for her saying my name. "Tessa," I managed. Deputy Marlon Pike looked up from the front counter with the subtlety of a raccoon in a trash can. "You two know each other?" "No," Tessa said at the exact same time I said, "Yes." That should have been funny. It wasn't. Because her eyes flicked toward the rain-streaked windows, then back to me, and whatever had brought her here was sitting on her shoulders like a wet coat. I stood too fast, knocked my knee on the desk, and pretended it didn't hurt because a man can wear a badge and still be humbled by furniture. "Come on back," I said. "We can talk in my office." Marlon's eyebrows climbed so high they nearly joined his hairline, but he wisely went back to pretending to read an incident report. Tessa followed me in. My office wasn't much. Framed county map. Coffee that had given up on itself. A plant my sister insisted would make me look less emotionally unavailable, which was rude but not entirely inaccurate. Tessa looked at the plant and gave the smallest smile. "You still hate fake greenery?" I stared at her. She remembered that? "It's real," I said. "It looks nervous." "So do I." Her smile cracked a little wider, and there she was for half a second. The girl who used to doodle tiny storms in the margins of her notebook. The girl who won every debate in civics and then apologized to the loser afterward. Then the smile vanished. I didn't know where else to go. I motioned to the chair across from me, but she didn't sit. She wandered to the window, arms folded, watching the rain fall off the courthouse roof. "I saw your name online," she said. "Sheriff Turner. I thought it had to be your dad." "My dad retired 5 years ago." "And you took over?" "Eventually." She turned. "You always did what people expected." That landed softer than an insult and deeper than a compliment. In high school, Tessa Grant had been the dream nobody dared touch. Not because she was cold. She wasn't. She was warm in a way that made you want to stand closer and behave better. She smelled like vanilla shampoo and pencil shavings. She laughed with her whole face. She dated a quarterback for 3 months, dumped him for being cruel to a freshman, and somehow became more beautiful to me after that. I never told her any of it. Back then I was a deputy's son with secondhand boots, a mother who cleaned offices at night, and a talent for disappearing into the background. Tessa was headed for art school in Chicago, the kind of life that sounded expensive just to pronounce. Then graduation happened. She left. I stayed. And now she was standing in my office with fear tucked behind her eyes. "What's going on?" I asked. She finally sat, but only on the edge of the chair. "My father passed away 3 months ago," she said. "I'm sorry." She nodded once. "He left me the old Grant place." "The house on Briar Hill?" "That's the one." It had been empty for years. Big white farmhouse, wraparound porch, apple trees gone wild in the back. When we were kids, everybody said it looked haunted. Tessa used to say it looked lonely. "I moved back last week to decide what to do with it," she continued. "Sell it, fix it, burn sage, who knows?" "That doesn't sound like a sheriff matter." "No." Her fingers tightened around her purse strap. "This does." She pulled out a folded piece of paper and placed it on my desk. I didn't touch it right away. The paper was damp around the edges. Her hand shook when she let go. "Tessa, I found it taped to my back door this morning." I opened it. The message was typed in plain black letters. You should have stayed gone. For a second, the rain filled the whole room. I looked up at her, and she was watching me the way people watch bridges they're not sure will hold. Has anything else happened? A truck slowed outside the house last night. No headlights, just sat there. I told myself I was being dramatic. She swallowed. Then I found that. Did you recognize the truck? No. Any idea who would want you gone? Her laugh was thin. Caleb, I've been back in town 7 days. Half the people here still think of me as the girl who left and got too good for Maple Ridge. I don't. The words came out before I could dress them up as something professional. Her eyes lifted. I should have leaned back, cleared my throat, asked another clean, official question. Instead, I remembered the last day of senior year, standing by my truck with a graduation card in my hand, watching her climb into her mother's sedan for Chicago. I remembered telling myself I'd give it to her if she looked back. She did look back. I still didn't move. Now she was here, older, tired, still beautiful in a way that made the room feel too small. I lowered my voice. I never forgot you. Tessa's lips parted, and whatever she was about to say was interrupted by my office phone ringing. Marlon answered up front. A moment later, he appeared in my doorway, face serious now. Sheriff, he said, we just got a call from Briar Hill. Tessa went still. Marlon looked at her, then back at me. Someone broke a window at the Grant place. For half a heartbeat, nobody moved. Then Tessa stood so fast her chair scraped the floor. I need to go. You're not going alone, I said, already reaching for my hat and keys. I didn't ask you to. I know. Her mouth closed. Marlon stepped aside as I came through the doorway. His usual joking expression had disappeared. Caller was Mrs. Dottie Vance. Says she heard glass, saw somebody running toward the back field. Description? Dark jacket, hood up, that's all. Send Deputy Keene up Old Mill Road, I said. If they cut through the field, they'll come out near the creek bridge. On it. Tessa followed me into the rain without another word. My patrol SUV smelled faintly of coffee, wet leather, and the peppermint gum Marlon steals out of my glove compartment. Tessa climbed into the passenger seat and buckled in with stiff, precise movements. You don't have to be brave right now, I said, pulling away from the curb. Her laugh came out sharp. That obvious? You're holding that purse like it owes you money. She looked down at her white knuckles and slowly loosened her grip. I hate this, she whispered. I hate that I came back and immediately feel 16 again, waiting for everyone to decide what story they want to tell about me. What story was that? She watched the wipers slash rain off the windshield. That I thought I was better than this place, better than everyone, like leaving was a crime. I knew that rumor. I'd heard it at the diner, at gas pumps, outside church after graduation. Tessa Grant got fancy. Tessa Grant forgot where she came from. I never believed a word of it. You left because you had somewhere to go, I said, and that's not a crime. Her gaze shifted toward me. And you stayed. I had somewhere to be. She was quiet for most of a mile, then she said, Do you know what I thought about driving into town last week? My devastating way with a locker combination? My mother's last winter. She said it plainly, the way you say things you've carried a long time. My car wouldn't start in the school lot. It was maybe 9 degrees. Half the senior class walked right past me. You came out with jumper cables and a flashlight in your teeth, got it running, and then never mentioned it again. Not once. Not even in English. It was a battery. It was February, Caleb. You didn't have gloves. I kept my eyes on the road because that was easier than looking at her. I told a roommate about you once, she added. In Chicago. She asked if I'd ever actually known a good man. What did you tell her? That I knew exactly one, and that I never said a single true thing to him. I almost missed the turn onto Briar Hill Road. The Grant house rose at the top of the hill like a memory with peeling paint. Even in rain, it was beautiful in a tired, stubborn way. The porch sagged at one corner. Vines climbed the trellis. A wind chime knocked unevenly against itself by the front steps. But the front window to the right of the door had been shattered. Tessa made a small sound. I parked and turned to her. Stay in the vehicle until I clear it. Caleb, that's my house. And right now it's a crime scene. Her eyes flashed. There she was again, the debate champion. Do you talk to everyone like that? Only people trying to walk into danger before I say it's safe. That must be a long list. Lately it's just you. For some ridiculous reason, color rose in her cheeks. I got out before I could notice too much. Rain tapped my hat brim as I crossed the porch, hand near my holster. The front door was locked, no fresh marks on the frame. Inside, the living room sat undisturbed except for a brick lying in a spray of glass. Wrapped around it with rubber bands was another sheet of paper. I cleared the downstairs, then the upstairs. Empty bedrooms, old quilts. Dust thick enough to show that nobody had walked through it in years. When I came back out, Tessa was standing beside the SUV despite my order. Of course she was. I waited 5 minutes, she said. It was 3. It felt like 5. Behind her, an older woman in a yellow raincoat hurried across the road under a pink umbrella. Dottie Vance had lived across from the Grant place since before I was born and considered every window in her house a neighborhood watchtower. "Sheriff," she called. "I saw him clear as mud, I did." "That means you didn't see him clear, Mrs. Vance." "Well, not his face, but he was tallish." Tessa blinked. "Tallish?" "Not short," Dottie clarified, as if that settled the matter. "Ran like he knew the land, toward the east pasture. And I heard an engine idling down by the apple trees a good 20 minutes before the crash." I found the tracks myself, out along the back lane. Wide tread, pickup or small SUV, half filled with rain. A boot print pressed deep in the mud beside them. And on a broken branch at the orchard fence, a torn strip of blue canvas, the kind that comes off a work jacket. I photographed it all and bagged the fabric. Tessa was on the porch when I came back, staring through the broken window at the brick. "What does it say?" "Tessa, what does it say?" I pulled on gloves, stepped inside, and slid the paper free. Typed like the first. "Your father should have told you the truth." She went pale. "What truth?" I asked. "I don't know." Then quieter. "But he was hiding something at the end. He sold the equipment. He sold Mom's piano. Every time I asked about money, he'd go silent for 2 days." Her fingers touched her throat. "The last time I visited, there was a man in his study. They were shouting. I only caught one line. 'You gave me your word.' Whose voice? I never saw him." Dottie made a small noise from the bottom of the steps, the sound of a woman deciding whether to be polite. "Mrs. Vance," I said, "say it." "Well, it's only that everybody figured this place was already spoken for." She glanced at Tessa apologetically. "Graham Voss has cut that orchard 9 years running. Told the whole Rotary breakfast last fall he'd be moving in by spring." Tessa turned toward me slowly. "Go home and lock your door, Mrs. Vance," I said. She went. The rain kept coming, thin and silver off the porch roof. Tessa didn't ask about Voss. She looked at me instead, arms folded, and said, "This morning, in your office." "Why did you say that to me?" "I could have hidden behind the badge. It's a good place to hide. People let you." Instead, I set my hat on the porch rail so I'd have somewhere to put my hands. "Because it's true," I said. Tessa didn't move. "Junior year," I said, "you asked me in the library what I wanted to be, not what I was going to be. Everybody else already knew what I was going to be. Deputy's kid, deputy someday. You asked what I wanted. You said park ranger." Stared at her. "You remember that? You said you wanted to work somewhere quiet where nobody knew your last name." A ghost of a smile. "You'd have been a terrible ranger, by the way. You'd have arrested the raccoons. They'd have deserved it." The smile stayed a second longer. Then the wind moved the broken glass on the floorboards behind us and reminded us both where we were standing. "You can't sleep here tonight," I said. "Not with that window." "I don't have anywhere else." The answer came too fast, too alone. "My sister has a guest room over her bakery." Tessa blinked. "Sweet Laurel? Lydia owns Sweet Laurel?" "She owns half this town's blood sugar." "I remember Lydia. She used to threaten people with library books." "She's advanced to rolling pins." That got a real breath of laughter out of her, small but alive. Lydia took one look at Tessa standing in her kitchen doorway with wet hair and a plastic evidence receipt in her hand, and did what my sister always does. She fed her. Cinnamon rolls, tea, a stack of towels, and a running commentary about the mattress upstairs. Then she looked at me with the expression of a woman silently writing an entire novel. "Sheriff," she said sweetly, "try not to interrogate guests before lunch. I'm doing my job." Is that what your ears are calling it? Because they're red. I considered arresting my sister. By afternoon, I was at the hardware store on Main standing across a counter from Graham Voss. He was 59, thick through the shoulders, the kind of man who sponsors Little League and shakes every hand at every pancake breakfast. His work jacket hung on a hook behind him. Blue canvas, torn at the left cuff. "I heard about the window," he said. "Terrible thing. You mow that orchard. 9 years. Harrison couldn't keep up with it after Ellen passed." His jaw tightened. He was going to sell me the place. Handshake, then paper. I put money down. "How much?" 22,000. He said the number like it had teeth. "Deposit." He was supposed to file it. Then he got sick. And now his daughter shows up from Chicago to flip the house to some couple from Columbus. "Where were you at 7 this morning?" "Loading feed at the co-op. Ask Danny." He leaned in, and I saw something under the anger that wasn't quite bravado. Fear. "I'm not the villain here, Sheriff. I'm the fool who trusted a man's word." Danny confirmed it, more or less. Times in a small town are always a little loose. I stopped by my father's place on the way back. Russell Turner has been retired 5 years and still keeps a scanner on the kitchen counter. "Harrison Grant died owing people," he said, handing me coffee I didn't ask for. "Not criminals, neighbors. That's worse. A man can pay off a bank." Voss says he put down 22,000. Then Voss is telling the truth, because he told me the same number at the Legion in March, and he was crying when he said it. Dad studied me over his mug. "The Grant girl's in town." "She is. You going to tell her, or are you planning on another 17 years? I left without answering, which he took as an answer. It was almost midnight when I came back to Sweet Laurel with the boarded window paperwork. The shop was dark, but the kitchen light was on, and Tessa was sitting on the steel prep counter in one of Lydia's aprons, eating cinnamon rolls out of the pan with a fork. "Don't report me," she said. "I'd have to arrest my sister as an accessory." "Worth it." She handed me the fork. So I stood there in a flour-dusted kitchen at midnight, sharing a fork with the girl who sat 2 rows ahead of me in English, and for about 20 minutes, nobody in Maple Ridge was in any danger at all. She talked about Chicago. 6 years painting murals on the sides of buildings, 3 years teaching, 1 apartment with a radiator that sounded like a man knocking. I told her about the water tower groom. She laughed so hard she had to put the pan down. Then she slid off the counter, went to her bag, and came back with a sketchbook. Old, soft-cornered, held shut with a rubber band. "You don't get to make fun of me," she warned. She opened it to a page near the back. A parking lot. Snow. A truck with the hood up and a boy leaning under it with a flashlight in his teeth. No face. She'd never drawn my face. "I couldn't remember it well enough," she said. "That bothered me for about 10 years. I looked up from the page and she was right there, close enough that I could see the flower on her sleeve, close enough that the room got very quiet. Her hand moved first. She put it flat against my chest, over the badge, and didn't take it away. "Caleb," she said. The kitchen door swung open. "I forgot the—" Lydia stopped dead, took in the scene, and did not have the decency to look sorry. "You know what? I don't need the timer." "Lydia, I'm going." She paused in the doorway with the cruelty only a sister can manage. "Are you going to tell her about the card, or should I?" Tessa's hand slid off my chest. "What card?" I have faced armed men with a steadier pulse. "Graduation night," I said. "I wrote you a card. I stood by my truck with it while you loaded up your mother's sedan. I told myself I'd give it to you if you looked back. I looked back. I know." My throat closed around it. I still didn't move. "Where is it?" "Bottom drawer of my desk at the office. 17 years. Tessa stared at me. Then she picked up her jacket. "Go get it," she said. My radio went off before I reached the stairs. Marlon, wide awake and clipped. "Sheriff, Dottie Vance just called. There's a truck up at the Grant place with the headlights on and a man walking the porch with a flashlight." Tell her to stay inside. Caleb, Marlon said. She says he's got papers in his hand. Says he's telling her the house is his. Tessa was in the passenger seat before I finished opening my door. Don't, she said. Don't tell me to stay at the bakery. I wasn't going to. Good, she buckled in. Because it's my porch. Voss's truck sat nose in at the bottom of the drive, headlights washing the front of the house white. He was standing at the foot of the steps in the same blue canvas jacket, a manila folder under his arm, and he didn't run. He didn't even move much. He just watched us come up the hill like a man who had been waiting a long time for somebody to finally show up and hear him. I got out with my hand loose at my side. Graham, midnight is not a business hour. I couldn't sleep. His voice was ragged. I've got the agreement. I've got the check stub. I want somebody to look at it. Tessa stepped past me into the headlights. Then hand it to me, she said. He hesitated, then did. She read it standing in the rain-cold glare, and I watched her go from furious to something quieter. A single page, handwritten, dated 2 years back. Her father's signature, the same crooked H I'd seen on 100 county forms. $22,000 received. Balance due on transfer. He never filed it, she said. He never filed anything at the end. And then he left me a house he'd already sold half of. She laughed once, with no humor in it. That's him. That is exactly him. Voss's face worked. I put my brother-in-law's money in that. I pruned those trees. I told my wife we'd have a porch. So, you decided to scare me off it. The headlights hummed. Rain ticked on the truck hood. I said quietly, Graham, your left cuff is torn. His shoulders came down like something cut. I never went inside, he said. I want that on the record. I never touched the door. You threw a brick through a window at a woman staying alone in that house. I thought she was in Chicago. It burst out of him. Realtor said she'd be gone by the weekend. I thought if she got spooked, she'd sell fast and I could... He stopped, wiped his mouth. There's no end to that sentence that sounds like a man I want to be. The notes? Both of them. Off the printer at the store. He held out his wrists, which almost broke my heart and did nothing at all for my temper. Do it in front of the house. I'd rather she watched. I read him his rights in the rain while Tessa stood on her own steps with her arms wrapped around herself. Marlon took him in. Criminal mischief, harassment, filing nothing but a mess. Voss cried in the back of the cruiser, and Tessa watched the taillights all the way down Briar Hill Road. He's not a monster, she said finally. No, he's a man who did something ugly because he was desperate. Both things can be true. She rubbed her eyes. I'll pay it back, the deposit. Out of the estate, whatever's left, however long it takes. She glanced at me. That doesn't drop the charges. No, it doesn't. Good. Her chin came up. I want both. I want him to answer for my window, and I want my father's debt off my name. God help me, I have never wanted to kiss anyone more than I wanted to kiss her right then, standing in the wreck of her inheritance, doing arithmetic on somebody else's honor. Instead, I went to my SUV and came back with an envelope. Cream-colored, warped at the corners, her name on the front in my 17-year-old handwriting, with a small ink blot near the G in Grant because my pen had leaked and I'd nearly rewritten the whole thing. Still sealed. Tessa took it with both hands. You picked it up on the way, she said. I picked it up before I got in the truck. She sat down on the top step, right there on the wet boards, and I sat beside her. She worked the flap open carefully, like the paper mattered more than what was inside. It didn't take long to read. It was 6 lines from a kid who had never said anything true out loud. Tessa, I don't know if you'll remember me after you leave, but I'll remember you. I hope Chicago is kind to you. I hope every room you walk into knows how lucky it is. If you ever come back, I'll be here. Caleb. She read it twice. I know because I counted. 17 years, she said, and you kept it in a drawer. I moved it once, from the glove box. Caleb, her voice cracked. I would have written back. That summer, that whole first year, I checked the mail like an idiot. I kept thinking somebody from home would say something that made me feel like I hadn't just been dropped off the edge of the world. I was scared. I know, so was I. She turned toward me close enough that the rain seemed to stop. I'm not 16 now. I don't need you to be brave in a card. Then I'll be brave here, I said. I want to take you to dinner. I want to fix this window and then argue with you about the porch color. I want the whole ridiculous thing, Tessa. And not because somebody threw a brick. She laughed, wet-eyed. Finally. And then she took hold of the front of my jacket and kissed me on the steps of that lonely house, and every stupid, careful 17-year-old thing in me finally shut up. When she pulled back, her forehead stayed against mine. Say it again, she said. The thing from your office. I never forgot you. I never forgot you either. Her thumb moved along my jaw. That's the part you didn't know. We sat there until the rain quit. She told me she'd wanted to kiss me at the debate banquet senior year and had planned 4 different ways to do it. I told her I'd have fainted into the punch bowl, then she got very quiet and her hand went still on mine. Caleb, that's not a good tone. I signed a contract in February, she said. A mural. 6 stories on the side of a building in Logan Square. I start in 9 days, and I'm under lease until August. The porch light buzzed above us. So you're leaving, I said. I have to go back. She looked at me steadily. Say something. I'll be here. Tessa closed her eyes. That, she said, is exactly what you said 17 years ago. She was right, and I hated that she was right. So this time I didn't stand by a truck and wait for somebody to look back. 9 days later, I drove her to the airport in Columbus, carried her bag to the curb, and kissed her in a loading zone, while a security officer told us twice to move the vehicle. 11 days after that, I traded 2 shifts with Jonah Keene, put 400 miles on my own truck, and stood at the bottom of a scaffold in Logan Square at 8 in the morning with 2 coffees, looking up at 6 stories of half-painted Ohio farmland. Tessa leaned over the rail, saw me, and shouted something at her crew I chose not to hear. She came down that ladder fast enough to worry me. You drove. I drove. 6 hours. 6.5. There was a wreck outside Kokomo. I handed her the coffee. You said I was good at waiting. I'm trying to fix my reputation. That was the weekend I met her friends. Ate at a Vietnamese place with plastic chairs, slept on a couch that hated me, and learned that Tessa Grant hums while she paints and denies it under oath. I went back in June. She came home in July for the hearing, where Graham Voss pleaded to criminal mischief and harassment, took his probation and his community service, and stood in the courthouse hallway afterward looking older than he had in the rain. Tessa met him there with a repayment schedule she'd written herself, in ink, on a page torn out of a sketchbook. He signed it with a shaking hand. Then he asked quietly if she'd let him prune the orchard one more spring. She said yes. That's who she is. In August, when her lease ended, she came back for good in a rented truck full of paint cans, a Radiator Loud Life packed into 30 boxes, and one incredibly opinionated cat named Whistler. Living beside Tessa Grant turned out to be nothing like dreaming about her, and considerably better. She got up at 6 and talked before coffee, which should be illegal. I came off a night shift smelling like rain and highway, and she'd hand me a plate without asking. We painted the porch a color she called sage, and I called barn green, and lost an entire Sunday to that argument in front of Dottie Vance, who ruled in Tessa's favor from her mailbox. Lydia fed us. Marlon started showing up for security checks that always coincided with peach muffins, and by Christmas he was dating my sister, which I am still processing. My father came out most Saturdays. He and Tessa were careful with each other at first. He had known her mother, and grief makes people polite. Then one afternoon I found them arguing about fence posts like family, and I stood in the yard longer than I needed to. By the following spring, the Grant house didn't look haunted anymore. It looked awake. Tessa turned the front parlor into a small studio and started teaching on Tuesdays and Thursdays, mostly kids who thought beauty happened somewhere else, to somebody else. I'd come by after shift and find paint on her cheek, sunlight in her hair, and some shy 14-year-old discovering he had a voice. We got married under those apple trees on the first Saturday in May, 2 years after a rain-dark Tuesday morning. Dottie Vance cried louder than anyone. Lydia made the cake. Voss sent a card and a pruned orchard. And a year after that, on an evening when the blossoms were coming down like soft weather, I stood out back with my wife while the windows of that house glowed yellow behind us. I thought coming back would ruin me. Tessa said. I touched the hollow of her throat gently, the place she reaches for when she's trying not to cry. You came back, I said, and I finally opened my mouth. She smiled. Took you 17 years and a brick. I pulled the old graduation card out of my jacket pocket. She laughed when she saw it because by then she knew I carry it on days that matter. I never forgot you, I whispered again. This time there was no ringing phone, no broken glass, no headlights at the bottom of the drive. Just Tessa rising on her toes to kiss me under a storm of white petals, while the house on Briar Hill stood behind us with every window open, finally full of light. What would you have done if the person you never stopped thinking about in high school walked into your office 17 years later, soaking wet and scared, and asked you for help? And have you ever kept something you were too afraid to hand someone? A card, a letter, a sentence you never said out loud? Tell me your story in the comments. If you like this one, leave a like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.